We both thank you very much. I wanted to say first what an honor it is for me to be here with one of the greatest pianists in the world. And I wanted to remind András, he probably doesn't remember, that the first time we met was 30 years ago. You were 6 and I was 7. And I interviewed you about Bach. And here we are 30 years later talking about Bach. So I think it's kind of extraordinary, but not surprising. And I wondered if we might start, before we get into the discussion, if we might start with a little music, perhaps some Bach.
All right.
Is there any particular reason you chose that piece? Or?
Yes, I love it. to me, this is just a symphonia, 3-part invention in F minor, but you hear all the essence of Bach within 2 minutes, and to me, that's the most important thing. A lot of composers, they don't know how to be economical. They talk too much. And this is a great example of how to say a lot in a very short span of time with not one unnecessary note. If you take away one note from this piece, you change something essential. And to me, it's a deeply spiritual piece. That's one of the fascinating things to me about Bach, that the sacred and the secular go hand in hand. Here you have an instrumental piece for keyboard, and yet you could be in the middle of the St. Matthew Passion. And vice versa. You do the St. Matthew Passion or the B minor Mass, and you have dance movements. So, and they come from the very same person.
It seems to me that Bach, as you just said, that Bach has everything. There's always everything there. And I wonder if perhaps that's why he's so universally revered. There are many cases of great thinkers in other fields who say that when they came into contact with Bach's music, it changed their lives. Do you have some thoughts about this idea of Bach as the universal musician?
I cannot answer that objectively, because subjectively, certainly, to me, he's a divine presence and the greatest composer of all times. Most people would agree on that. I think that if you really dislike Bach, you keep quiet about it. It's really something to be ashamed of. I know people who don't like Shakespeare. They don't like Rembrandt, and they don't like Bach. But it's not something to be proud of. It's their problem.
It may seem strange to us that in his own time, there were plenty of people who didn't hold him in such high regard. Do you have some thoughts about that?
Yes. Bach never chose the easy way. And he's incredibly demanding to listen to, even today. Emotionally, intellectually demanding. It's anything but light and entertainment. It's really, there is no element of that. Although there is plenty of joy in the music, I think there is even plenty of humor in it, but it's very sophisticated humor. When you look at the Quodlibet, the last variation of the Goldbergs, where he's using popular German folk songs with very naughty words. That, however, those folk songs were obviously known to people of the time. They are not known today. So people are listening to the Goldbergs and they think they are listening to something holy and sacred, which it is in a way, parts of it. Again, the secular, when you listen to the 25th variation, again you are in the St. Matthew Passion. Then you listen to this. This Kraut und Rüben haben mich vertrieben. Cabbages and turnips have driven me away from you. Yeah? So it's not exactly sacred.
Yes, yes. Shades of Beethoven, who did similar things.
Yes, and so from there comes Haydn's humor and Beethoven's humor. And a lot of those composers after that who are very great, but they have no humor. Where is humor in even Schubert? Not in that sense. In Chopin? None. That's not criticism, but to me, humor is very important. I'm very sorry for people who don't feel that there is place for humor in art and in music. But it should not be vulgar. It's sophisticated humor. So it needs also intelligent listeners, people who know what the joke is about. But if you have to explain a joke, it's too late. Or if nobody laughs. But then, you know, you have to know how to tell a joke. So if somebody will play this last variation, which is possible. I've heard it like that. It's not, but it's not very funny. And it's wrong, because if you know what these folk songs are about, then you cannot play it this way. It's not a matter of opinion or taste. I mean, there are some things in interpretation which are a matter of personal taste, and other things which are not a matter of doubt or question.
Your mention of Schubert brings to mind the fact that you said once that the way into Schubert, to understand Schubert, is through the songs. Is there a way into Bach, or is it just everything?
No, it's not everything. Certainly, again, I think it's the Protestant church music and the Protestant chorale and the cantatas and language, really. I mean, it's universal and international, but Bach spoke no other languages apart from German. Maybe Latin, yes. That's why to me the B minor Mass is the quintessential Bach piece, because it's not in German. So to me it's more universal than the Passions, which are in German. However, his language was German, and all these chorales are in German, so you don't have to be German, but it doesn't hurt to be familiar with the idiom, because it also dictates the rise and fall of the music. However, I have to add here that Bach wrote, for example, an overture in French style, which I will play here. He wrote a concerto in the Italian style. And also all the keyboard concertos or the Brandenburg concertos are in the Italian style. Now, Bach spoke neither Italian nor French, maybe a few words. And he has never been outside of Germany. This is very important. All his contemporaries, look at Handel, look at Scarlatti. I mean, Scarlatti, at least he traveled from Italy to Portugal and Spain, which was already a major distance in that time. And Handel was a real traveler and a cosmopolitan. And Johann Sebastian Bach stayed in Germany all his life, and he was still so familiar with all the styles of the time. When he writes this Italian concerto, it's really everybody knows it, but it's a tour de force, because he writes a concerto without an orchestra, but you have the sensation of having the orchestra, the tutti, and here. And then you have the soloist, the concertino, just exposed with I mean, nobody has done that before. I mean, all right, you have an orchestra and the soloist, like this is like the model of Corelli or Vivaldi, but Bach studied those works and actually made very beautiful transcriptions of it for the organ, for the harpsichord of Italian masters, and then he incorporated that knowledge into his own art. But he has never been to those places. This is something that I find fascinating.
I do too. Your playing of the 25th variation of the Goldbergs reminded me of another question I wanted to raise with you, which was Bach, the musical conservative, or Bach, the progressive and radical. He seems to have both sides. And I'm wondering if you think about this when you're performing various pieces from the Well-Tempered, for example.
Yes, this is an important question. And to this I would answer that if you look at maybe the two greatest geniuses in music, Bach and Mozart, I don't think that they were particularly original. Neither of them. That's not their main virtue. I think the main virtue is that they like a sponge, they collect information, they collect knowledge, and they make something greater out of it than the sum of its parts. I would not call Bach the most innovative composers. I think even Handel was more innovative, and Scarlatti certainly in his own way. But certainly Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach, his son, was more innovative. And the generation after Bach did not appreciate him. They thought of him as a conservative, as somebody passé. It's finished. Now we are going on a new road. And then Bach was forgotten. Really, he was forgotten until Mendelssohn performed in 1829 the St. Matthew Passion in Berlin, and still composers like Mozart. You can see in Mozart's string quartets dedicated to Joseph Haydn. That's the point when he discovers Bach, and he's starting to write fugues and fugati in the finale of the G major string quartet. And his works are on a higher level because he discovered Bach. So it was very important for Mozart, for Beethoven, for Schumann, for Chopin, for Mendelssohn to know Bach. But until Mendelssohn did the St. Matthew Passion, these people had to go to the library of Baron van Swieten in Vienna to look at manuscripts and contemporary copies, because nobody played this music. People were not interested in old music those days. This is still only in the newest creations. This is something composers today can be very nostalgic about.
Is that why you include Mendelssohn on your orchestral concerts?
Yes, obviously. Also, I adore Mendelssohn, and I think he's a giant of a musician, and I consider him highly underrated, even today. A lot of people don't appreciate Mendelssohn. Yes, a sentimental saloon composer. That's nonsense. It's highly insulting. And not just because of his rediscovery of Bach, but already when Mendelssohn wrote string symphonies at the age of 12, I mean, he has a complete mastery of counterpoint and fantastic knowledge of Bach, of late Beethoven quartets. It's astonishing of a child composer.
Well, the octet, which I think he wrote when he was 16,
yes.
is just unbelievable.
It's colossal.
So let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is playing Bach on a modern piano. Do you want to share your thoughts about this?
That's the elephant, yes. Well, it's certainly an elephant, but it's a very useful elephant because it can do a lot of things. If you ask what's the right instrument for Bach, It's impossible to answer that question. Look at the 48, the well-tempered clavier. We cannot say what instrument it was written for. Klavier is a sammelwort, a collective word. It means all the keyboard instruments that were available for Bach at the time. So that is first and foremost the clavichord, beautiful little instrument for in a room, but already in this room, maybe in the first row you would be able to hear it, but already the second row you will have problems. And yet this was Bach's favorite instrument. And I have one of these in my home in Florence, and I love playing it, but really only for myself and maybe for one listener. But it's an essential instrument, not very practical. Then there is the harpsichord, which is a more public instrument and certainly wonderful for certain pieces. The Goldberg Variations is a good example, or the Italian Concerto, really specifically written for a harpsichord with 2 manuals. And then there is Bach's most important instrument, which is the organ. So it's all, plus they used to have pedal harpsichords and all kinds of hybrid animals. So it's all a collection of that, but you cannot really now say which specific prelude and fugue was intended for which instrument. And yet I think this elephant is the only one that can somehow, if you treat it well, do justice to all of these works. You cannot play all the preludes and fugues on the clavichord. Certainly not on the harpsichord. I mean, people do, but I suffer from that because you have all these appoggiaturas. If you play an appoggiatura, for example, you see, the second note has to be any musical person. I'm sure you are all musical in this room. If I ask you to sing an appoggiatura, then you will sing pam taram, tam tiram, sospiri, sospiri. The second syllable is softer than the first. If it's not, then it's unmusical. And the harpsichord is not able to play that. I mean, it's just not possible. You have to make huge agogic changes. And I think that distorts the music. I mean, it becomes something in Bulgarian rhythm. Because if I play... And that's what the harpsichordists tend to do, because there is otherwise no possibility to make that second note softer. So therefore, I find that all these kind of very vocal pieces are not suited to the harpsichord. And then you have the organ. You have the end of the A minor fugue, you know, which starts, it's a monstrous fugue, and it's you hear that pedal note, and you cannot play the end of this fugue with 2 hands. It's just not possible. So that proves this is an organ fugue. But it's the only one which is obviously an organ fugue. And so this is the only example in all of Bach where I must touch the sustaining pedal, which I hate to do. Not because of a dogma. We should talk about this because it's one of my idei fixes, and I have been seriously attacked on this by a very great fellow pianist, I will not mention the name, who said, how dare you not use pedal in Bach? And I say, why should I use pedal in Bach? because all the great pianists of the past have used pedal in Bach. Is that an argument? I don't think so. Certainly, in all those instruments that Bach had at his disposal, the sustaining pedal did not exist. It's a much later invention. And it can do terrible damage, destroying the voice leading, destroying the clarity of the counterpoint. I mean, the clarity is essential in this music. You cannot play like if you are like talking with your mouth full. You have to speak clearly, articulate. They won't understand you otherwise. And it's very strange that these very same pianists who then attack me on not playing Bach with pedal, then you take Beethoven's music. The first composer who really uses the sustaining pedal creatively in the Waldstein Sonata, the beginning of the last movement. You know, this is all in one pedal. Yes, it's blurred. So what? That's what he wanted. He didn't, but when you take piano lessons, then your piano teacher tells you when you use the pedal, then you change pedal on each harmony. That's what we are told. No? If you don't do it, you get hit on the head or on the hand or wherever. But this is not what Beethoven wanted. So why don't we take him seriously? Then I know the argument. Then all the opposition says the pianos in Beethoven time were different. Then I asked them, have you played on Beethoven's piano? No. Well, I have. And it has a different timbre, but as far as this thing is concerned, pedaling through harmonies, it's blurred there too. It's an idea. And then it's very important. Then after this blurred sound, then Beethoven says, look. Then there is no pedal. So it's this blurred sound opposed to the dry sound, secco and non-secco. So I'm going on a different road now, but you know what I'm getting at that. So why use pedal in Bach, and why to use pedal in Beethoven when he's asking for it? I mean, I take that seriously. I think this is not a matter of choice.
I think another issue that's related to this, something that you said about articulation in Bach, that some people play Bach always legato, and some people play Bach always staccato, and in either case, you're in deep trouble if you want to bring out the sense of a phrase. I don't know if you want to show us.
Well, that used to be really the case. I mean, this glorious 19th century style of piano playing, with a lot of pedal indeed, but they really played everything legato. And then comes the Neue Sachlichkeit, after the Second World War, where they exaggerate in the other way, playing everything detached. And now, luckily, there are also very good things about the early music movement. I used to be rather ignorant about it and then very critical, and now I am a little bit more objective. So there is a lot to learn from it. For example, varied articulation. Yes? That you have to, if you have 4 16th notes, then you can take 4 16th notes, like say, you can play 4 legato, or you play 4 dittage, or you can play 2 plus 2, or you can play 1 plus 3, or 3 plus 1. So there are endless variations, and Bach seldom gives you an indication of that. And you have to use your imagination and your knowledge of style that you know how it should go. There are several possibilities, but it has to be imaginative. I don't know. Let's take any theme now. For example, I mean, in the 19th century, people would play the it's nonsense. And then they would play it's another nonsense, and it's very ugly. So you need to play something and then something more elaborate. So you have one short sentence, another short sentence, and then a long sentence. And that has to come across.
Bach hardly ever gives us tempo markings. Also phrase markings, dynamics. We're often very lost. So how do you determine what the character of a piece is, what the tempo should be, and so on?
Well, that is very personal, but again, it comes from experience. How many other works of Bach you know, and what you associate it with. There are also some real indications. The preludes are easier to characterize, especially in the first book. In the second book, the preludes 20 years later become much more complex and much more polyphonic. So it's harder to come to terms with those. But also there is an idea of the different keys and the symbolism of those keys, which a lot of musicians of Bach's time, like Kirnberger and Mattheson, try to characterize. It's very entertaining because they never agree on anything. I mean, for one theoretician, a certain E major is lyrical and pastoral, and for the other one it's highly dramatic. But it's still pretty obvious. You take a piece like this, you know. So this is the pastoral to me. There is no question. If you know the Christmas oratorio, or you have those movements when you have the sheep grazing. And occasionally you have a tempo marking by Bach, very seldom in the 48. For example, one of the greatest of the set, the last of Book 1, the B minor. And here, prelude, he marks andante alla breve. And andante is not a slow movement. That's also a misconception of many musicians. Andante comes from the Italian verb andare, so in walking motion, yes? So when you have a movement and it's alla breve, so you are counting 2 in a bar and not 4 in a bar. So trio sonata, you have two oboes and a bassoon, and playing in this. And then you have a fugue, which is largo, and this is very slow indeed. So it's so chromatic, you have all the 12 tones in the first two statements. It's unbelievably modern music. And again, you have, that's another good example of the appoggiaturas and the sospiri. Why I don't think this could be played on the harpsichord, because I must have those second notes softer. Some people might disagree, I don't mind. But this is really not harpsichord music. And here you have a very slow tempo marking by Bach. But it's, again, what is a tempo marking? I mean, when you see an adagio by Bach, it's not an adagio by Bruckner. And that's why it's important to have certain experience with those instruments of Bach's time, what they were capable of. And the same is true for Beethoven, for Schubert, and for later music. No? I mean, if you ever played a fortepiano from Schubert's time, then you know what are the speed limits. What is a slowness that is just not possible, and what is a fastness that's also not possible. And so then why people come and play this sonata in this tempo? You can have dinner and they are still playing it. Great pianist, Sviatoslav Richter. It's unbelievable. He plays it even slower than that, and plays all the repeats. And if you ever try to play this on a Conrad Graf, I mean, you can't, because the sound dies. And I think we have to observe these parameters.
I think this makes it very clear why you object to some of the great romantic transcriptions like Busoni and so on.
Well, object. Who am I to object? I mean,
well, you wrote.
I don't like them. I don't like them. But please, if you like them, then take them. Listen to them. I don't play them, and I don't listen to them, because you know, our piano literature is enormously rich. We are very fortunate. We have wonderful music. I mean, 10 lifetimes are not enough to play just the great music. Why do we need transcriptions? Why do we need, if you are a pianist and you love Schubert Lieder, then choose a singer, ask a singer, and play the Schubert songs. But don't play them in Liszt's transcription. I mean, that completely destroys Schubert's music to me. But, you know, let's not get into Liszt now.
Okay. Let's talk about the Well-Tempered Clavier. Can you give us a sense of what the point was of these collections?
It's, you can only speculate, because we don't know the answer. Why Bach came back to this idea? Obviously, the first one was highly successful, so he wanted to try it again, and it's a, 20 years is a very long time. I can say that because there are about 20 years or 25 years between my two recordings of this, and you could ask, why do you make another recording? And I cannot answer that really. Actually, I feel a bit embarrassed about it, because it's a wonderful opportunity to do it again, but to me I don't feel that I'm that important that it should be done again and again. So I've had the opportunity to do some of these works again, and it was very, very useful really. After 20 years, it's not that you feel differently about a piece of music, but you have lived with it and you have experienced other things, and that all shows somehow. It's like a maturing wine, a good wine. It's not very good wine is not very good when it's 2 years old. I mean, it doesn't matter how hard you practice or study these preludes and fugues. After the first 5 years, you are just a beginner, and it needs time and it needs space and to digest it and think about it. So for Bach, it was probably also very important to come back to the idea, and he has had a lot of material. He took a lot of the fugues from earlier material. Some people call Bach a great recycler. I don't mean this in a derogatory manner, but certainly it's his right to take material from earlier music and put it in a new dress, maybe transpose it. It's also interesting. I was talking about the different tonalities and what they mean, and yet Bach is the first who would write the same piece. He would write, E major violin concerto, and the same one for keyboard. And then he is using eighth notes, and for the violin concerto it's quarter notes. Very, very different character, different tempo also. The orchestration is different there, and then he adds a whole left-hand part for the keyboard. So it's not really recycling, but recreating.
I was going to ask you how your ideas about this music have changed over the years, but maybe that's a little difficult to say. I was listening to your earlier Goldbergs and the later Goldbergs, and looking myself for what differences I was finding. I didn't know if you had some.
You should know this better than I do. I have no idea.
Okay.
What differences did you find?
Did I find? They're very subtle, I have to say. I mean, both have certain qualities that I love about your playing. One is impeccable clarity, and the other is heartfelt. That's always there. There's a tenderness, and there's something, it's just filled with heart, I find. I would say that in the earlier version, there was a touch more sentimentality, perhaps. And in the later version, a touch more cohesiveness.
Yes, maybe. You see, I don't know.
Okay.
But thank you. You are much too kind. I didn't want you to give me compliments, but it's sentimentality. Yes, I don't like sentimentality, you see. And I also found that in the earlier version, or when I listen to some, I don't like to listen to my own recordings. So why? It's a waste of time. But sometimes just to learn from it, and I do find some sentimental touches which I did not consider sentimental at the time. And I think with age you get a little bit more secure. You have more self-confidence. You don't want to be interesting. That's very, very, very important. I don't want to be interesting. I don't mind if somebody finds my playing very boring. Others find it highly interesting, because I see all the other subjects that I talk to people, and what do they find interesting and what's boring. When I was a young man, I used to find Switzerland a very boring country. Now I think it's highly interesting, because I'm not looking for those things anymore. I don't need to be entertained. And so that's an advantage of age, maybe, that you don't want to impress, you don't want to entertain. You know that this is a great piece of music and it can take care of itself. All you have to do is not to ruin it. It's already a lot. And there Bach is very generous, much more generous than, let's say, Mozart. Because if I play any movement of Bach, let's say, or I play I could choose any movement of Bach, show me one piece, I don't know. Doesn't matter. Some things are important in character, if you can still play. To destroy the music. It's still there, like a diamond. But try this with any Mozart piece and you will have disastrous consequences. And I don't know why that is, because Mozart music is just so delicate. When in timbre, in the touch, in the tonal colors, and in the tempi. I mean, it's just a little bit off of the middle road, and it feels utterly wrong, and not Bach. So Bach is very generous.
Let's talk about the Goldbergs. What do you make of this story about how it was commissioned for an insomnia problem?
It's what the Italians say. Si non è vero, ma ben trovato. Maybe it's not true, but it's well found. It's a lovely story. Insomnia, yes. I find it hard to believe this story. This little Goldberg, who was a court harpsichordist, a pupil of Bach, and he was the harpsichordist of the Count Kaiserling, for whom the work was written. He commissioned it, and he was 14 years old, and I doubt it very much that a 14-year-old can manage the Goldberg variations. Maybe today in China any 14-year-old can manage it, but those days hardly. And also when the Count supposedly said on one of those nights when he couldn't sleep that, my dear Goldberg, now play me one of my variations. But this is interesting because today we would not dream of playing one of this. I mean, just to take out one of the variations. It's somehow has achieved a holy status. It's a whole work, and it's untouchable. You cannot just extract from it. And obviously, they did at that time, if the story is true. And also, Bach never thought of this as a concert piece. There were no concerts as such, as we know them today. So life was different, society was different. It had different functions. So I think it's a very important work in Bach's oeuvre, because he took in this Klavierübung towards the end of his life, he always addresses a certain problem. The first part are the 6 partitas. So he takes the Baroque form of suite, writes a huge first movement, a prelude or a toccata, and then the dances, and so it's raised on a level that was not known before. The second, as I said, this Italian concerto and the French overture. He takes all the French and Italian stylistic elements. The third part is all for the organ, E-flat major prelude and fugue, and the choral preludes, and the 4 duets, which are wonderful pieces. Those I love to play on the piano. And then the final part is the Goldberg variation, which is, he takes the form of theme and variations, which is something that he has very seldom used. Only 3-4 times in his lifetime. There is aria variata, an early piece, and then the choral variations vom Himmel hoch, da komm ich her, for organ, the C minor Passacaglia, and the famous Chaconne for solo violin. That's theme and variation. And so he was not so interested in variations because most of his contemporaries were writing very, very brilliant, very extroverted variations. And Bach is not an extroverted composer. That's very important to notice. So he takes the idea of theme and variation, and really it's a challenge for him to make an artistic statement. But for him it was not so important to listen to this or that it should be played. It's just there, sheer perfection. And by the way, I keep repeating this because there's still some people come now. It used to be that nobody played the Goldberg variations. It was hidden in libraries. Then Wanda Landowska resurrected it beautifully on the harpsichord, and naturally, thanks to Glenn Gould, it has achieved in an unbelievable cult status, thanks to Glenn Gould, single-handedly. As a result of which now everybody plays the Goldberg variation. Kids play it. They come, they said, what else have you played of Bach? Nothing, not even a 2-part invention. And then they play this incredibly complex piece. So I say, all right, now play for me the Goldberg variations. Play the theme. So immediately they play. So I said, you don't understand. Play the theme. So they play again. And they play it about 10 times until I say, do you know where the theme is? And they don't. And the theme is here. The bass is the theme. So I ask, how can you play this piece if you don't know that? It should be forbidden. But people play this, and they don't. They are also. Then I tell them, okay, then take the score and just play me the bass. They are not able to, only with the 2 hands, because they practice mechanically. Practicing mechanically is a waste of time. It's not what intelligent humans should do. They should practice a little less and think a little more.
Of course, Gould's, his first Goldbergs are kind of kaleidoscopic, so full of color and all kinds of effects, pianistic effects. You said about Gould that he was a master of counterpoint, I think you said. I'm wondering what you think of some of the other, you mentioned Landowska just now. What about some of the other interpreters of Bach? Have any of them struck you as being important?
But to me, I mean, not with the Goldbergs, which there is no recording of him, but of the 48, Edwin Fischer, I absolutely adore. And again, now we are talking about an older generation, but Edwin Fischer has really influenced me enormously. And the older I get, the more so. And I get, with age, I have a great admiration for Glenn Gould, but I go further and further and further away from it and closer to Edwin Fischer. Because you asked me a few minutes ago what are the main influences of Bach or the key to Bach's keyboard music, and I said it's this cantata and the vocal tradition and the German language, and I find that very strongly represented in Fischer, and also the spirituality of his playing. You know, there are these movements in the 48 which are really deeply religious. There's just no question to me that something like this. Or this one. Could go on. Usually the piece is in minor key. And in all these pieces, Fischer is always, to me, absolutely right. And Gould makes a parody of it. And I cannot forgive him for that, because this is, okay, music is subjective, but it's not that subjective. If we are talking about a crucifixion, it's a crucifixion. It's not a joke in the coffee shop. And there should be clear distinctions in that. And therefore, I find that I go with Edwin Fischer.
I meant to ask you before you mentioned Bach's, how few works we have of Bach in the theme and variations category. Were there other keyboard works, perhaps by other composers, on the scale of the Goldbergs before the Goldbergs came along?
Yes, from minor composers, certainly, but not on this scale. And not with this complexity. I mean, usually, even either they would take the bass, that's not unprecedented, or usually they have theme and variations where the melody is being elaborated and ornamented, and in a very virtuosic manner. But Bach's concept with the canons and the symmetry of this piece, that every third variation is a canon in increasing intervals. It's absolutely colossal. And this has not been done before Bach, and certainly not until Beethoven's Diabelli variations, which is a comparable achievement, but a very different piece of music. However, I don't think that the Diabellis would ever have been conceived without Beethoven having known the Goldberg variations. There is no proof of that, but it's obvious.
Before we run out of time, I was going to ask you to demonstrate some of the Goldbergs, the variations that I love. But before we run out of time, we should move on to some of the other repertoire. But let me ask you one thing before. You mentioned the quadlibet and the folk songs. What would you think Bach's meaning was in ending with this? Was it simply it was time to lighten up, or?
It's time to lighten up, and it's time to come back on earth after the really, after the deepest point of this set, which is the 25th minor key variation that Wanda Landowska called the Black Pearl. And you just have to come back on earth. And also, this is a very, very human, very, very down-to-earth message. You know, that's why I find Bach so wonderful, that he's one of us, the best of us, but one of us.
Yes, something to aspire to.
It's also important that after the quodlibet, this area returns, but after, if you play all the repeats, it's like 70 minutes later, you hear it with different ears, because so much has happened. So this is very important, like you see a person after 2 or 3 years, and it's not the same, even if she or he looks the same. But it's not the same. This is a miracle of time, and time is an essential part of music.
Yes. The keyboard concertos, the harpsichord concertos are usually called. You're going to be conducting and playing. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to ask you about this. Do you enjoy conducting? Have you been doing it a long time?
Well, I am not a conductor at all, but I like doing it. Yes, certainly. It's also something that intrigues me enormously as a profession is a wrong word, but as a métier. How do you do it? What are the psychological elements of this, which are considerable? How do you deal with people? It's very important, because as a pianist you are a loner. You are always alone. You have to practice alone, travel alone. You can become a little bit obsessed with that. And you can counterbalance that, luckily, with playing chamber music and playing with friends and colleagues. But when you go and play a concerto as a soloist with an orchestra, with a conductor, you never really have more than minimal contact with the musicians, and I do miss that. So I started to do this with the Bach keyboard concertos, and then later with the Mozart and Beethoven. And after having done all these concerti, then I started to do symphonic repertoire and formed my own orchestra, the Cappella Andrea Barca, which gives me the greatest pleasure and joy. And occasionally I do things with other orchestras, but I'm fully aware of the fact that I'm not a conductor. And yet, you know, certain things you can do, maybe in a more intimate way. Even in later concerti, I recently had the pleasure of doing the Schumann concerto a lot without a conductor, and I have played it with hundreds of conductors, some very good ones. It was never good. And this time it was always good. And you know, all the conductors, they only want to rehearse. And how do they conduct? Here they beat ram ta pam ta tam ta pam ta tam ta. Always beat in the pose, and the orchestra is never together. So I just let them play. Tam tam tim pa pam pam. I just sat there like that. It was perfect every time. So you don't always need the police there. It doesn't help. And something even so complicated like the Schumann concerto, but it's a piece of chamber music where the piano is integrated into the whole. It's always there, but sometimes it's not the most important instrument. No. You know, sometimes you play a duet with the clarinet, you play. And then you listen there. And here the piano is not so important. And yet you always have this piano sitting in the front, and he's like the center of the universe. And there is not this chamber music concept. So I'm just telling this as an example that there are sometimes advantages of not having a conductor. Mm-hmm. But then there are limits also. You have to be aware of that.
Do you think about, I'm sure you must, the fact that that when Bach performed these concertos, you know, the orchestra was different, the venues were tiny, the obligato was being done by a harpsichord and all of that stuff. How does any of that figure into what you do when you present them?
Well, obviously, if you play them at every Fischer Hall, it's different from the Café Zimmermann, where Bach played it for maybe 20 people. Yes, certainly, and we are using modern instruments, and yet I think that the spirit should be the same. I mean, we are not inflating this music because we are playing bigger venues. Hopefully not. You should not do that. I mean, also, it's wrong to think that in a large hall you have to produce more volume. You have to, focus better, yes, and certainly articulate better so that people will hear you. However, if you ask me, then ideally I would not play in these huge halls. I never feel terribly comfortable in them. Some are wonderful, like Carnegie Hall, really. But basically there is an intimacy of music that is lost if we are playing it to 2,000 or 3,000 people. And yet, what is the answer? So you sometimes play for 2,000 or 3,000 people, but keep it in mind that you go and play in more intimate venues, and luckily we also have that right here in New York. That's why I love to play at the Y or at Zankel Hall, or even at Weil Hall. It's very beautiful. What's wrong with it? Just you play for 200 people, and you are very near. So it's a very intimate encounter. Mm.
Well, let's finish up by talking about the dance suites. The partitas, the French suites, the English suites, and so on. Mm-hmm. Was Bach's interest in the dance suites simply that most people writing secular music at this time were writing dance suites, or is there something beyond that? Is he interested in dance? Because all of his music, to my ears, is inflected with dance rhythms.
Yes, certainly, and yet I don't think this is highly stylized dance music. It's not something that you play at the village ball and people are dancing to it. But the roots of it are there. And obviously this was very, very popular at the time because all of Bach's contemporaries used it. And again, his knowledge mostly of the French clavecin music of Couperin and Rameau is obvious there. But again, like we have the very, very monumental English suites, which are very public pieces, and then the French suites are very private pieces and very intimate. To me, they are like beautiful. Like each French suite is to me like a Vermeer picture. Very delicate and very, very small, but unbelievably beautiful and very precious. And probably the most important are the partitas, which for him was very important because he published the partitas at his own cost as his Opus 1, as first part of Klavierübung. And there is a real concept there. But there is a concept in the French suites too, because the French suites, the first three are in the minor key, the second three are in the major key. And they do form a sequence. But the partitas certainly first one, B flat, you know. So second one, and A minor, and then the fourth one starts with the French overture, D, and then and finally so for me, again, Bach never thought of this as that somebody would be as crazy as me to play the 6 partitas in a concert. And then I did, and I was always very uncomfortable starting the concert. It's just a very delicate piece, very difficult to, the audience is not ready and I'm not ready. And then I thought, why do I have to start with this? No, there's no law for that. And so I said, let's start with because this is the first one I played when I was a kid, and I feel very comfortable with this. It's a very, and then if you take G major, A minor, B flat major, C minor, D major, and E minor. So you have an ascending hexachord, and so that gives me a logical arch. But this is just an interpretation. However, one has to think of such questions and answers.
Well, we're almost out of time, and I wondered if we might take just a couple of questions if there are any questions from the people here. Yes. Oops. Okay.
I want to know if, since Bach was so religious, does numerology ever figure into his work? Like, you look at his things, do you think about, is he thinking 3 notes? Is he thinking 6 notes, 7 notes, those numbers that have something to do with spirituality or religion? Do you ever look at his music that way?
Certainly. And not just that, but he was interested in the Kabbalah and numerology, and it's very, very important. If you take, I mean, there are certain theories, and I think it's interesting that if you take certain notes and give them numbers, like the letter C. Letter C is the 3rd in the alphabet, so it's A, B. It's 3. Then D is 4. Yes, or you have also his own name, which is BACH. Yeah, B natural, of course, in English, but in German it's H. So it's the 8th letter. So B is 2, A is 1, 3 is C, and H is 14. So you have 14 as a key number, and you take a theme like then add up all those notes, and there are 14 notes. And there are endless things like that. You just add them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, yeah? But you don't think of it because you just hear it. So it's interesting, and there are endless, little tricks there, and most of them are really not coincidental. I think the numbers were very important to Bach. no question.
Okay, we had one other hand raised, and I think that might finish us off, yeah.
There's some more comparisons between book 1 and book 2 of the works I put out here. I'd be interested.
Yes, as I said, to me the most important is that in book 2 the preludes are gigantic. A lot of them are in binary form, 2 parts, both repeated. So it's just incredibly much more complex and much more rich. As for the fugues, it's difficult to say because in book 1 you have 2 5-part fugues, the C sharp minor and the B flat minor. In book 2 there are no 5-part fugues, so already that is very complex. And if you take the B minor fugue of book 1, if anything, it's much more complex than B minor of book 2. But then I think if I could put it in words, the difference is like comparing the St. John Passion with the St. Matthew Passion. 2 passions, and again about 20 years apart. So I would say that the first one is a Sturm und Drang piece from the middle period, and the second one is a very mature masterpiece from the late period. That does not say which one is greater. They are both fantastic, with the passions and also with the well-tempered clavier. Lady wanted to ask something. And
Okay.
Please.
Concerning the intention of Bach as a composer, what do you think are his intentions for the players that come after him and that play his music? And also, what do you think are the expectations of the audience? What does Bach want people to feel when his music is played? Maybe it's an impossible question, but I'm sure that you thought about it.
What Bach expected of his performers? Well, first of all, he was perfectly able to play it himself. Therefore, he gave us very few instructions. He and his children and his pupils, and this was a very narrow circle. However, they knew exactly what he meant, so it was not necessary to give too many instructions. I think he would be highly surprised that we are playing his music today. He was not writing for eternity. As a deeply religious person, he said, yes, God gave me talent, and it's my duty to write. I have to serve my community. I have to write a cantata for every Sunday, as well as I can. Eternity or, the individual. That's why I find Bach so incredibly great, that this ego that we find with later composers and performers today, my God, the ego is gigantic. With Bach, there is no ego. The letter I as a person, ego, it doesn't exist. It's we. It's the community. So that's very important. And also, audiences and concerts. There were no concerts those days. At this Zimmermann Cafe, he played maybe the Brandenburg Concerto for a few dozen of people. That's it. So he would be really surprised, but he would be pleased, I think. And he would hope that this message comes across. The message is very important. And that I find very often, that even in this very noisy world we live in, but in a good concert, when Bach is performed and listened to, then we have this feeling of a community. And that's why it's important to have live concerts, because you cannot do this alone in your living room. It's wonderful to listen to it at home, and let's do it. But to go together and listen to this, and also to concentrate, to focus, that's very important. Bach is not easy listening. You cannot have popcorn and Coke and go. You really have to, and that is a problem today, because people are no longer able to sit still and concentrate. I mean, I have had some unbelievable noisy audiences last week here. It was like being in the middle of Grand Central Station. All right, there were a lot of kids, but I don't blame the kids. But what about the adults? They cannot sit still, because it's this television, computer audience, and you press a button and you change the channel, and so for that, Bach is a great experience and great educator. But by all means, it should not be like a police state. One should come to a concert by one's free will and have a wonderful time, really. But listen, Alfred Brendel made this beautiful anagram that listen and silent are the anagrams of each other. Same letters. This is also very Bachian. He would have used it had he spoken English. So we have to listen in silence. And then it also helps us, the performers, because it's very difficult to concentrate on the complexity of this. You are leading a 5-part fugue, and you have 5 threads that run in their own direction independently. You cut one of them, it's finished. The whole structure collapses. So the audience can be very helpful or very distracting.
Well, thank you so much, András, for this time.
Thank you.
And thank all of you for coming.
Thank you.